Hello, BookTube. We are now barreling towards the end of the month of February, and February has been a month for a special event here in our little corner of BookTube called FFS, February Fantasy Stories, created by the Bookish Bryants as sort of a companion to their New Worlds November. New Worlds November looked at the genre of science fiction through the lens of short stories. And February Fantasy Stories does the exact same thing. And like with New Worlds November, I am one of the hosts. And like with New Worlds November, we broke FFS into categories in case you wanted a little structure to your reading. So we started with classic fantasy, anything written before 1971. Then we had dark fantasy, we had sword and sorcery, which are in themselves very classic iterations of the genre. And then for this final week, we moved on to something that has always been a lot less congenial to me. Actually, the same thing was true with New Worlds November. New Worlds November also had 4 prompts, and the fourth of them was time travel, which has never really done it for me. And here again, with FFS, the final prompt, the final guide, if you want to use that, is also one that has never really worked all that well for me, and that's urban fantasy, where the typical fantasy elements, usually the fae, but it can be anything, although obviously it can't be anything, it can't be dragons, but where the usual elements, the usual trappings of fantasy, magic in other words, exists in a fictional setting side by side with the things we don't see in Tolkien. Gutters, pavement, industry, steampunk or otherwise, that sort of thing that we tend not to see. In the classic fantasy stories, they tend to be set in, the setting usually tends to be agrarian, pre-industrial Europe. So, good wives, dirt roads, barrels collecting rainwater, that sort of thing. But no steamships, no railroads, no guns, no nothing like that. And urban fantasy tries to do both, and there are examples. That where it works. There are great examples where it works. I would argue, for instance, that Dracula, the second half of Dracula, when the action shifts to London, I would argue that Dracula is a very effective urban fantasy. Classic examples might be the Viraconium novels of M. John Harrison. The urban part doesn't have to be our urban; it can be just urban. The world of Viraconium is very much urban. New Cropazon, the Perdido Street Station world of China Mieville, I think you could easily say that is not only urban fantasy, but a very successful example of urban fantasy. But most of the things that I've read, most of the examples that I've read over the years have not been so successful. They haven't convinced me at all. So I was looking at this fourth week of FFS as a chance to maybe rectify that, especially since we're concentrating on short stories. So I got 2 anthologies. I have a bunch of urban fantasy here. I avoided all of it. Most of it's novels anyway, and although you're perfectly free to read whatever you want for these little events of ours, I did want to concentrate on short stories. So I left the novels out of the picture, and instead I got 2 anthologies. And I picked and chose around them, but ended up reading all of both of them, just not sequentially. The first was this. It's edited by P.N. Elrod, and it's Dark and Stormy Nights with a K, with a lineup of authors doing urban fantasy. You have classic fantasy cover art, but the characters are dressed in leather and they have guns and whatnot. And the other one that I got was even bigger, and that's Good Things, edited by okay, I didn't realize this. It's edited by 50 people, so that would probably explain a lot of its uneven qualities. That's this one here that I got on Amazon. And some of the names overlap between the two, but one thing that was missing from both for me was that sense of being on board with enjoying this to begin with. The sense that I give to classic fantasy or dark fantasy or especially sword and sorcery. Something about urban fantasy and myself just don't get along. There were a couple of stories in here that I kind of sort of liked, but most of them were going for cheap, irreverent laughs. Lots and lots of substance abuse, lots and lots of forced profanity, lots and lots of of characters being sort of nonchalantly cynical about everything. And I've noticed that as a besetting quality in a lot of the urban fantasy that I've read at novel length. And unfortunately, whether it's setting the genre or whether the genre is affecting it, that has percolated into the short stories that I've read. We're on what is this, the 25th or 26th of February. Monday is the last day of the month, so I don't know that I'm going to be delving too much more into urban fantasy. I might try, just for the not to let the team down, I might try one of the urban fantasy novels that I have here, maybe one that I haven't read yet, if I have one that I haven't read yet, or maybe I'll look around for a full-length novel. Maybe it's the length that's bothering me. Maybe it's just that I don't get along with short stories. I thought I did. I do when it comes to science fiction and fantasy, but maybe not this particular thing. Because it's two kinds of world building that you're cramming into one story, often at the expense of each other. I mainly wanted to make this video to show these anthologies to you, first of all. There's Good Things, which has all of these editors. And then there's Dark and Stormy Nights with a K. Both of which had an intriguing mix of things. I'm not saying that the anthologies themselves as works of art were failures. It's just the stories. I don't think there was a single story in any one of these tables of contents that actually did it for me. So I mainly wanted to make this video to give you a progress update, because I haven't made as many FFS videos as I made New Worlds November videos, and also to thank you all for coming along for the ride. I'm going to continue to read urban fantasy for the few days left in February. I'm not holding out high hopes, but you never know. After all, the books that I've mentioned, the classics of the genre, I really liked, so it's possible that I could find that again. If you have recommendations, feel free. Some of you have sent me recommendations. I've actually acted on them, and it might just be me. It might just be that I'm just temperamentally not inclined to urban fantasy at all. That if you're introducing urban elements, urban sentimentalities like technology, and the way that technology shapes a world, then you can't have magic. Or it could be something deeper than that. Because with some of these stories, not so much in Dark and Stormy Nights, but very much in Good Things, I'm probably reading too much in here, but I often got the sense that the writer was thinking, technology, magic, it's all the same. Now, what real difference is there between these two things? And that really bothers me. I'm reading more and more contemporary fiction where characters who are talking about the four humors or bad spirits causing disease aren't being ironic. Where the authors of the books, it's not just that they're having their characters say these things, it's that the author thinks, well, maybe there's something to this. Maybe there's something to this 1,000-year-old discredited pseudoscience quackery. And I'm seeing it online as well. Lots and lots of people thinking, well, you know, the important thing, in addition to your antibiotics, is that your humors are in the right balance. It could just be that creates a kind of inner resistance to me that would make it so that virtually no urban fantasy short stories could work on me. That could be. I don't know. I'm going to keep at it for the rest of the month, but I wanted to make a video anyway, and thank you all for joining in. I've had a lot of emails from a bunch of people trying their hands at fantasy, including the Big Book of Modern Fantasy and the Big Book of Classic Fantasy. There's those two Vandermeer anthologies that people have been enjoying quite a bit. I agree, they're fantastic anthologies. And you know, in an event like this, you don't have to adhere to the prompts at all. So I'm gonna sign off from the event for now. I don't think I'm gonna make another FFS update, but there'll be other events coming. I'm sure if the Bookish Bryants can do New Worlds November and FFS, who knows what they can't be talked into doing next. I'll do it. I'll do my best behind the scenes. But anyway, I wanted to give you an update. I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.